Sometimes it feels like you're in these seasons where things are slow and where nothing's happening and I'm going backwards and why am I feeling this? But it is all a process of you're being set up to shoot forward. And it's all by God's design.
Hey there. Welcome to the God's Goodness Podcast. We are your hosts, Josh and Shelly Hankins, and we're here to share real stories of God's power. Stories of hope, healing, and miracles that will strengthen your faith. No matter what you're walking through, we want to remind you that God is good and He's still moving today. Let's dive in. If you love God but feel worn down, stuck, or unsure why victory still feels out of reach, this conversation is for you. This isn't about trying harder, and it's not a faith failure. Today, we're welcoming back Caitlin Childs. Her first episode became one of our top 5 most downloaded, and she's back with a message many believers need right now. In this conversation, we talk about how defeat quietly takes root and how God leads us forward, often one clear step at a time. If you've been faithful but tired, stay with us. Caitlin, thank you so much for coming back with us. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited about it.
Me too. Before we get into things, would you say a brief prayer over the episode and our listeners?
Absolutely. God, I just come to you today and pray that you would use us as vessels to speak to your people and to say what they need to hear, that you will meet them in their stories right where they are, and that you would just speak to their hearts in a way that only you can. Get us out of the way so that you can do your best work. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Before we talk about victory or the book, can you take us back to the season where defeat felt present and where looking back now, you can see God's goodness meeting you even before things changed?
Yes. So I think when I wrote my first book, I was very much riding a high, feeling like I had gotten to know who God is, and I was learning so much and I was developing so much that it felt like this spiritual high. And I was so excited about everything. And then when the newness started to wear off from that, it was kind of like, okay, but why am I still struggling with these mindsets that I've had forever? Why am I still struggling with these old thought patterns? Why do these old habits keep creeping back up? And it almost felt like I was regressing backwards into a place that he had already delivered me from. And so I really just found myself feeling defeated. And he was so patient with me and so gentle with me as he walked me through that and showed me that I wasn't going backwards, that this was actually part of the process too.
I love it. He can be so gentle in how he sanctifies us to be more like Jesus. When you came to our conference virtually, I feel this has a little something to do with that and a little bit about identity. Is that ringing true for?
Absolutely. I definitely think that it had to do with my identity. Part of the unraveling that I had to do with the mindsets was remembering who I am as God's child, but not only remembering who I am, learning that it is okay to be imperfect and it is okay to still struggle, even when you are walking with God and you know who He says you are and you know your identity. It's okay to still struggle with those things and to still wrestle with it from time to time. The identity shift doesn't mean that, your life is perfect and everything's better just with the snap of a finger. It's very much a process of unraveling the things that you've dealt with your entire life.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we learn along the way through our experiences that we have to unlearn.
Right.
So you mentioned that it felt like regression, but God was telling you it was progress.
Mm-hmm.
Could you elaborate on how you seemingly going backwards in time is progress for God going forward?
The analogy that I like to think of is, when you're shooting an arrow, you pull the arrow backwards in order for it to shoot forwards. Mm-hmm. And that pulling back is a very slow process, right? It feels like, right. And the setup is a whole lot slower than the release. And so sometimes it feels like you're in these seasons where things are slow and where nothing's happening and I'm going backwards and why am I feeling this? But it is all a process of you're being set up to shoot forward. And it's all by God's design.
How hard has this transition been for you, considering that, you from your first book that you were instructing on how to hear from God? So you clearly hear from God. How hard was it for you knowing that you can hear him and still struggling with this regression?
So I kind of compare it to like being an older sibling. I don't know if y'all have younger siblings, but when my baby sister was born, it was almost like all of a sudden everything was all about the baby and I'm not the baby anymore. And why am I not getting all of this attention? And, it kind of feels like, but what about me? And my parents would tell me, like, you're older now. And so there is more expected of you now. You are expected to be mature and to grow, in wisdom and in stature. And so it almost felt like I was the older kid who was watching, all of these other people come into the faith and they're getting all of these beautiful emotional God moments where it's like, I remember that. I remember being in that position and I remember how awesome it felt. So why now do I feel like it's almost like I'm getting less attention? It's almost like I'm the big sibling that's just not getting the attention that the babies are getting. But what he was showing me through that is that it is just a process of growing and maturing. And when you are maturing, you're learning to do things kind of on your own. That doesn't mean that we're independent of God. We still depend on him, but we become less codependent. We no longer need to just get direction on every single solitary thing. He's showing us how to trust ourselves. And he's showing us how to trust that we can listen to him and that he can lead us and guide us even when we're not, clung so tightly to him that we feel him every second of every day. And so it was kind of that sort of process where he was just leading me through learning that growing and maturing is okay. And it's part of the process. And he even used my son, who's 8 years old. He said, look at your son. You don't expect him to act like a baby. If an 8-year-old is acting like a baby, something's wrong, And so the fact that he is growing and maturing, it doesn't mean that your relationship is any less. That connection is still there. It just looks different as you grow and evolve. And I think that's kind of what he was showing me, is that our relationship is going to look different through different seasons, but that doesn't make any of the seasons wrong or bad.
So what you're basically equating it to is you're off of milk and you're on the meat.
Exactly.
And when you're on meat, chewing for the first time, it can be difficult and you might take too big a bite without learning how to cut the meat, that there's a process to it as well. And sometimes we just want to go back to where it was easy and mom fed us with the bottle and I didn't have to worry about my own thing. But there is a beauty in the maturity. There is a beauty in being able to be self-servant to yourself when it comes to cutting your own plate of food and being able to feed yourself and being able to guide others in how to do it when they're ready, and to be able to help your parent, in this case, Father God, in raising the little ones that need the attention.
Exactly. And that's exactly what he was showing me, is that it is a way that we can help him. Not that we're taking on his responsibilities, but that when we grow and mature, we can bring others along with us.
Right. He expects us to be a good example to our younger siblings.
Right.
He doesn't expect us to be a rebel rouser and teaching them to do the bad things and teaching them how to smoke behind the house. He wants us to take responsibility and tell him when they're struggling, like, hey, there's a smelly diaper, or hey, they're hungry, or if there's something we can help, that we can help them do it, so that we don't need to cry to him and he can just look and watch us and say, yep, that's what I taught you to do.
Yes. And just imagine what it would be like if we all did grow in maturity and got to that point where we could help the people around us. How much different the world would look if we all got to that point.
Mm-hmm. Where do you suppose the ending of this maturity is? In this life, I know we will never get it right because we'll never be completely perfect or sanctified in this lifetime. But how far do you think it's possible to go in maturity with the Lord?
I think the limit does not exist because that's kind of what I learned throughout my first book. The title of that book was 7 Days to a Life of Limitless, and that was kind of what God showed me, was that your potential is absolutely limitless. There is no boundaries that I have for you. It is up to you how far you want to go. And I think a lot of people stop short of their potential because it gets hard. The more you mature, the harder it gets to walk that out, because you are going to have to face things from your past. You are going to have to face mindsets that don't serve you anymore and relationships that don't serve you anymore. And you're going to have to deal with those things. And sometimes I think that people get to a certain point where they're like, okay, I don't want to go any further. And because God is such a loving and understanding Father, He will allow you to make that choice for yourself. But if we want all that He has for us, I think it's important that we just keep moving as far as we can go with the time that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So how far down do you think you regressed before you started picking yourself back up and seeing kind of like what God was trying to do for you? Like, were you conscious of how far you were going? Were you willingly going down? Or were you fighting like heck not to go down?
I definitely had times where I fought it. But for the most part, I was aware of it. And it was almost like He was setting the option in front of me. Like, do you want to go here or not? Because if you do, I have good things for you on the other side of it. But if you don't, that is your choice and it's up to you. But if you want to get back to that place of like that spiritual high, you're going to have to go through the valleys too to get to the other mountaintops. And so I was very aware of it happening. And it almost felt like I was having to look back on my life. So in a way, He was kind of taking me backwards. He was taking me into the past. And He was showing me all of these things that I have thought about myself, about others, about the way the world works for all of my life. All of these mindsets that I had that were not serving the person He was turning me into. And so it was this process of, if you want to become this person that I destined you to be, we're going to have to deal with this. And we're going to have to unravel these thought patterns and put them to bed so that I can renew your mind and give you a new way of thinking that will serve you moving forward, so that this is not going to be a hindrance for you anymore.
Mm-hmm. I love the analogy more than the bow and arrow, the highs and the lows of a valley and mountain. We live in the Pittsburgh area, but I'm going to reference the Appalachian Mountains, which run north and south through many states. And if you look to the east of us, it's pretty flat. And if you go to the west in Ohio, it's pretty flat. But in the middle, it starts to get really hilly. So as you get closer to the mountain top, it's hilly. So you have a little hill at first, and then you go back down. And then you have a bigger hill, and you go back down. And then you have a bigger hill until you start getting peaks. And then you go down sometimes farther than the last valley. But you can't make it to the top straight up. And I think there's a purpose to that, because if He just gave us the Eiger and there was no mountains or hills to it and we had to climb right up that, most of us would perish. Most of us would not be able to do it. Most of us wouldn't be able to continue that pace without building the strength it takes to go up the little hills first. And it sounds weird, but when you go down, it feels like regression, but there's a break there, right? We don't have to be perfect. We realize that. And then we go up a bigger hill, and then we have a little bit of a break as we go back down that hill. And it seems like regression, but it really is. It's protecting us. And then we go up another hill, and it's a larger hill. It's a taller hill. It's, twice as tall as the last hill. And we have the strength to make it. And I could keep going, but you have to go back down first. I really like that analogy, and I'm glad that you mentioned it.
Yeah, I think that that's an issue that a lot of people have, is that they think of their Christian journey like it's this linear climb up a mountain. And you never go back down, and you never get worse than you were at the beginning. And you just only go up from here. And like you said, that's just not the case. There's all these hills and valleys and hills and valleys. But what God promises us is that He'll be there with us through all of it, that we're not walking any of it alone. So whether you are on a mountaintop where everything feels awesome and you see the goodness of God, or whether you are in the valley of the shadow of death, like He's with you in both places. And one of the things that I learned through this process is that I got to see different aspects of his personality in different locations, so to speak. On the mountaintop, I got to see, wow, he really is the God that gives good gifts to his children. You know, I got to see him as a good father, and I got to see how much he loves me and how willing he is to want to make me happy and give me a good life. And then in the valleys, I got to see, wow, he really is the comforter. He really is the one who will guide me through every situation. He really is patient with me when I'm whining and complaining and just want to get out of here. He's with me in all of it. And there's different things that you can learn about him in those different places. So no matter where you are, there's probably a different aspect of himself that he's trying to reveal to you through that.
Mm-hmm. That reminds us of when we had 27 months of no discernible income. We learned that he's our Jehovah Jireh, the God of provision. And then when I got healed of 17 years of chronic neck pain, then he's our Jehovah Rapha, our healer. Mm-hmm. So they all have a purpose, every experience, and how we can get to know him better.
Absolutely, because that's the whole point, is he's constantly trying to reveal himself to us every single day. And a lot of times we just can't see the forest for the trees because we're so focused on our own pain. If we could zoom out a little bit and say, okay, God, what are you trying to show me about you in this? I think that we would become so much closer to him, and it would just unlock a new level in our relationship with him.
Mm-hmm. And it's also like, what are you trying to show me about myself, who I really am? Because a lot of us were born a certain way, but through the experiences, we lose who he created us to be. And so we're relearning the true selves that he made us to be.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
If you've been listening for a while, you know we love sharing stories where God moves in unexpected ways. And lately, I've been hearing some powerful testimonies from people using the X39 patch by LifeWave. It's a little patch about the size of a quarter that uses light to support your body's natural processes. That's it. Nothing goes into your body. No drugs, no injections. It's backed by years of research and designed to promote general wellness. Now, I can't promise results, but what I can say is this. People I trust are using this patented technology, as well as myself. We're loving it and even building an income stream just by sharing it. So if you've been praying for something that aligns with your values, whether that's for your health or your finances, this might be worth exploring. Tap the link in our About section to learn more about X39. So your book is Leaving Defeat. How do you differentiate between like defeat and just a hard season? Is there like any difference in that? Like, how do you describe each of those?
So that's a great question. The difference between defeat and a hard season, I think defeat would be where you feel so far behind that you don't see a way out. And, you know, you can go through hard seasons and know that the sun is going to rise again, and you can have hope for that. But I think that defeat would be when you've lost hope and you're just willing to sit down in the darkness and not even try to find a way out. That's how I would qualify defeat. And that's kind of where I was. I felt so defeated and I just didn't even see a way out. And even just sitting in that, God met me in it and lit up the path, but it was still up to me to walk out of it. It was still up to me to take that journey with him and to work through all of these things, like I said, and get to a place where I did feel victorious again.
What did defeat look like to you? What kinds of things were you experiencing that you had to come out of? Can you share with us that?
A lot of what I struggled was mental struggles. And I've heard somebody describe it this way. It's like when Jesus sets you free, it's almost like he removes the rats from a rat-infested house. You know, he removes the rats from the house. But then the process of refinement is you got to deal with the rats' nests that they left behind. And you got to deal with all of the residue that was left over from these things that have been there for years and years and years. And so for me, when I wrote my first book, I was aware of how set free I was. I was celebrating the fact that the rats were no longer there. And then I got to the point where he was like, okay, but we still got to clean house. We've still got to deal with this stuff that they left behind. Otherwise, you're not going to ever feel totally free.
The damage was done.
Yes.
The rats were gone, but the feces and the torn up furniture and the carcasses of the ones that didn't make it out, all that was left behind.
Yes. And I think that that's a large part of what the process was for me. And so a lot of it was just mental. For example, I dealt with loneliness for a long time. I dealt with a lot of fear. I dealt with doubt. I dealt with false humility, insecurity, all of these different things that were ingrained in me from childhood, that I just had these massive, massive amounts of fear and loneliness and mental anguish, really. And so he was really having to teach me one by one how we're going to deal with these things, how we're going to shift your perspective and clean out the rat's nests and clean up our house so that we're operating with a completely blank, clean slate.
Did you go through the process of deliverance? Then, like a lot of people follow these steps that they're laid out in the Bible. And did you go through those then?
I don't think that I would qualify this as deliverance as much as I would call it refinement. It felt a whole lot more like just refinement, being put in the refiner's fire so that we could burn away all of these things that weren't meant to be there. But like I said, the rats were gone. So I had already felt set free. I just had to deal with all of the yucky stuff that they left behind.
So if somebody's dealing with all of those things that you mentioned, a lot of people go through loneliness and they might look like they're not lonely at all. And so what would be some tips that you could give somebody who's feeling lonely?
There's one thing that I mentioned in the loneliness chapter in this book where I talked about there's a difference between isolation and incubation. And a lot of times what we feel like is isolation is really just us being prepared for the next season. We're being prepared for the people that God is going to bring into our lives and the community that we're going to step into. And so it's really a season of incubation. And I gave the analogy of like, we live on a little hobby farm. And so we like to hatch chickens and we put those eggs in the incubator and they are isolated. They are by themselves in an incubator. And then the heat gets turned up. And as that heat gets turned up, they start to grow and develop. And what happens as they get bigger and bigger and bigger inside that egg, it becomes more cramped and more uncomfortable the more they develop and grow until it finally gets to the point where they have to break free. And once they break free, then all of a sudden, all of the other chicks start hatching too, and they find themselves in a community that they didn't even know was there. And that was kind of how the story unfolded for me. Was I went through this season where for 5 solid years, it was just me and God. And I was basically feeding myself. I mean, I went to church every Sunday, but the church we went to was really far away. And so I didn't feel like I had that sense of community because we were commuting so much. I'm just talking to God every day. I don't have friends around me. My husband worked a lot. My kids were finally going to school. And so I was just me and God all day, every day. I was listening to sermons. I was talking to him. I was reading my Bible. I was learning. I was growing, but I still felt lonely in that season. I still felt like, okay, God, where are my people? Surely you don't want me to be this isolated. Surely this is not your plan. But what I didn't see was that it was temporary and that he was preparing me and growing me into the person that my community needed. And so by the time he walked me into our new church that we're at now, I was the person that I needed to be for that community. And there was this kind of symbiotic relationship where I was able to present something that they needed and they had exactly what I needed. And it was completely a divine setup, but it would not have worked that way if I had not gone through that season of incubation.
Mm-hmm. Man, we got some good analogies in this episode.
You know, I love a good analogy.
Josh is great at coming up with some too.
It's a talent. Or it's a gift.
That's the way my brain works. I prefer things that help me understand.
Yeah, it'll help people remember them longer.
Yes, I agree.
I like to think I have a mind like Jay's. He liked analogies. He just called them parables.
He always spoke in parables, and that made so much sense to my brain. Whenever I read a parable, I'm like, oh, okay, I know what you're trying to say.
It has so many different ways to be taken and lessons that can be learned through one thing. So what's another takeaway that you learned from leaving defeat that you just want the world to know?
So I think the biggest takeaway that I had was about victory in itself and having to kind of redefine that in a way. Because I think a lot of us look at victory and we think of that as like, I have overcome my enemy. I'm never going to struggle with this again. My enemy is defeated completely and I don't have to work hard anymore, right? Like you've reached this place where you won and you get to go eat ice cream. And that's just
loving that plan.
That's just not the reality that we have here on this earth. We will absolutely step into that on the other side of this life when we enter heaven with Jesus. That will be our ice cream party in the sky. But as of right now, we have an enemy who does not rest. And he constantly is out to attack us. And he constantly is waiting until we rest to attack us because he knows that's when we're not on our guard, right? And so I had to redefine what that meant in my mind. Because if you're thinking that you're going to get to this point where, yay, I did it, and now I'm going to have an ice cream party, then you're going to be constantly disappointed when you can never achieve that. So looking at it from a different angle, I did a lot of research on this. And one of the analogies that I came across was sword fighting or fencing, and how when you're in sword fighting, and full disclaimer, I'm not a sword fighter, so I don't.
Not on the farm.
This is the loose analogy that I don't fully understand, but I know enough about it to know that the analogy works. So in sword fighting or in fencing, they say that you have the upper hand when you're making your enemy back up. When you are the one that's advancing, that's when you are operating from a place of victory. When you are the one that's retreating and the enemy is advancing on you, that's when you're operating from a place of defeat. And so if all we have to do to operate from a place of victory is just advance, even when we feel like backing up, then that's how we can walk victory out in our lives. And I even think of the example of like Paul when he was in prison and he's sitting there, you know, in chains because he's sharing the gospel. That doesn't look like victory, does it?
No, not at all.
That doesn't look like what we think victory should look like, where he's literally in prison. He's being beaten daily. He's in terrible living conditions. And we look at that and go, wow, God, where are you? You know, if Jesus gave us the victory, where's the victory in that? And for me, when I look at that story and I see Paul in chains in a dirty prison, rotting away, and he starts singing, that to me is the point where he advances on the enemy. And he says, I will not back up. No matter how many times you cut me, I will not back down. I am going to operate from a place of victory because you can't defeat me as long as I'm advancing on you. So him singing was kind of that moment where he was like, I'm not going to back down. And then what happened after that was the prison doors flung open and they could have walked free. But he saw the bigger picture and he knew that it was for the sake of the salvation of the guard and the entire guard's family. And so for him, that was the win. not being set free from the prison, but the salvation of those around him.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely exciting to win souls for the kingdom.
Absolutely.
I love that you mentioned Paul in prison, because I think a lot of people, our listeners included, may feel like they are in a position of defeat because of their location, where they are physically, where they are spiritually, where they are at home, financially, circumstantially. They might feel like they're holding the wrong cards. They're back against the wall, that they're at the bottom of the pit and the enemy is pressing his attack. Or, if you think you hit rock bottom, he's handing you the pickaxe. You can always go further, right? And I think we miss the opportunity that God has for us, that his hand is always extended, that he is always ready, that he has already promised us victory, that it doesn't matter what our circumstances look like. It matters who is the determiner of our victory. And so we could be operating from a position of, I can only press forward and attack, and it may kill me to do it. But we're missing the point that God has our back. Like, when we're backed against the wall, God is that wall. And I think some of us need to be reminded of that God doesn't leave us in those moments. He doesn't turn his face away like, oh, they're fighting, I can't watch. He's got our back, quite literally. When we can't back up any farther, it's because we're pressed against him. I think that causes the enemy to stumble the most, is when he knows that if he misses, he's taking a shot at God. He has to press this in. He has to be precise. He has to be perfect to get us off of where we are. And I think it takes us to realize who has our back and where our position is, that will not give him an opening to do so.
Absolutely.
So is there another book that you have planned now that you've gone through these two? Because I know it takes time to go from struggle to book being read or written and published. So is there something else that you've gleaned after this book was, or while this book was being written? Is there another thing that God has pressed upon you to look forward to in your third book, Cephas Peak?
I feel like I always have 15 ideas in the works, but I typically just wait until I feel God telling me, okay, this is the one we're going to focus on, And he's really put an idea for a fiction series on my mind and given me a lot of ideas for that would be heavily, heavily symbolic in a lot of the things that we're talking about, walking through out of religion into a place of relationship, and just kind of combines all of the lessons that I've learned so far and that I'm still learning. So I'm really excited about what the future holds. I don't know in what order I will release the books that are in my head, but I do know that every time I write a book, the book itself is for the readers, but the writing process is for me. Because that really grows me as a person, because I am deep diving, I am researching, I am learning about these topics that I'm writing about and really just diving deeper into it. And so anytime I feel God telling me to focus in a specific area when I'm writing, I know it's because he has something he wants to show me through it. And then I just relay that to the readers, and then they get to benefit from me wrestling with that as well. So there's plenty in the works. I'm just not sure which one will get released next, if that makes sense.
From C.S. Lewis to Sea Childs, we're doing some Narnia-esque, heavily influenced.
You know what's funny is that it kind of reminds me of Narnia, but not in the same genre. Just because of the symbolism.
C.S. Lewis had a lot of good, positive things to say for the Christian community that were not in his books. And he definitely heavily used analogies and imaginary prose for symbolism in Jesus and in fatherly love from our Heavenly Father. And so that's why I brought it up, because, you mentioned that. I think that's a great idea. And we don't have enough positive, influential fiction novels that young adults and adults can read and maybe glean a little truth out of it at the same time.
And I'll be completely honest with you. I have procrastinated it because it's intimidating. It's incredibly intimidating to write a book like that and it be good. And that's yet another area where God's having to refine me and say, hey, we're just focusing on your creativity right now. We're just focusing on that gift that I gave you. And you can trust that if I gave you that gift, it's good enough to be used. So that is, I feel like you even bringing that up was a little bit of a push that like, hey, we're continuing on this and we're not going to give up on it when it gets hard. So that's just another illustration that I'm walking this out too.
Mm.
Even though I wrote a whole book about it, I'm constantly walking it out in my own life and having to continue to walk it out into a place of complete and total victory. So
we're not working on practice what you preach. We're working on practice what you prose.
I love it.
Perfect.
I love that.
You already know we only talk about things here that align with our values. That's why I partner with Live Good. They offer clean, high-quality wellness products. Think vitamins, superfood blends, magnesium, and more. All third-party tested, so I know exactly what I'm using. And the best part? The prices are actually affordable. It's not hype, it's just smart stewardship. And beyond the wellness side, there's opportunity too. People are earning income simply by sharing what they already use and believe in. It's simple, it's honest, and it's working for a lot of people. So if you've been looking for a wellness company that reflects your values and fits your lifestyle, this might be the nudge you need. Tap the link in our About section and explore Live Good for yourself. I love how you write these things from walking them out. They're not just theory. What point do you realize that a message needs to be put into words for others?
I typically let the Holy Spirit take the reins on that. And the 2 books that I've written so far have been because he told me it's time to write these books. And he's given me, the subjects to talk about and things of that nature. But it typically just gets to a point where I have learned so much throughout a season. Because again, the way my brain works, I tend to hyperfixate on one area.
Mm.
And so I will hyperfixate on, oh, what is God's character? What do I not know about him? And I'll hyperfixate on that until I feel like I've learned everything I can learn. And then he says, okay, write a book. For this season, it's a little bit different because he is having me lean into the creativity that he's given me and use that as a vessel for the story rather than just sharing information. Because there are people who learn better from things like parables, from stories, from things that paint a picture rather than tell you what you need to hear. And so I do think that both kinds of books are very necessary.
So coming back to this Leaving Defeat book, without giving the whole thing away, what's one shift people have to make to begin leaving defeat behind?
I think the biggest shift is just realizing that you're not hopeless just because you feel like you're walking through a dark valley and that your circumstances don't have to change before you can feel differently about the life you're living. A lot of it happens in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it happens in a shift of your perspective, and those perspective shifts can be so simple, but so impactful if you are just willing to seek them out. And I know that a lot of times that is very difficult for people. It is difficult for them to see things from a different angle when they've been stuck at this one angle for their entire life. And so I do hope that this book helps them with that just by being a voice who's walked through it, and that I can offer them a little encouragement and say, hey, this is what God taught me. Maybe something in here will help you too. Just helping them make those simple shifts that will help them start to view their lives differently so that no matter what it looks like, they can look at it differently.
Teach them to be a little more receptive.
Right. Because another thing is I see a lot of people feel defeated and not be willing to take encouragement because they just want to sit with it because they almost feel like they've earned their battle scars and they don't want someone to just take that away, But if we can allow that in and allow that improvement.
Let me sit in my pain. I don't need any more help. I want to wallow in self-misery. And it's what we do. You're not
for all, it's what you know.
Yeah.
We do.
It sounds silly to say it out loud.
We do that.
Right. So many people do that.
I'm willing to bet every single human on earth does that as a pattern for every single person, that we just want to wallow in misery,
Right.
like stages
Because,
of grief or something.
well, we even see that happen with Job.
Mm.
When Job had everything taken away, he had a little bit of a pity party too.
He had a significant amount taken away, though.
Yes, he did. I think it's normal, is what I'm saying. I think it's normal to lean towards that direction.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to limit your pity party. You can't just
Yes.
live there.
Right.
Yeah, you can have your party, but then, finish the race and have your ice cream.
Yes, set a limit.
Right. And that's what I like to tell people when I'm feeling really heavy about something. I will set a certain amount of time and I'll be like, okay, you're going to have 3 days to grieve about this. And then we're going to pick ourselves up and move on,
Mm-hmm.
because if you don't limit that, it can take you under.
Mm-hmm.
You have to feel your feelings, but then also move forward.
I liken it to some big boy conversations I've had with God where they don't always look the prettiest. And if a pastor would have heard the conversation, they probably would have gone pale and died of shock. But I never stay in that moment.
Mm.
It's always just releasing the emotional buildup with the understanding that I have, and then always coming back. So that's what I look at it like that. Like, you don't stay there in your pity. Don't stay there where you are. Just realize that you are not behaving the way you should. It's okay. And then straighten out and fly right in a minute. Like, compose yourself. If you were out somewhere and you had to have a good cry, well, don't leave the bathroom just yet. Compose yourself, get cleaned up, and then come and join us at the table and have some ice cream.
Right. And I think you bring up an important point too, is that you wrestled that out with God,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
because that's crucial. I think a lot of people try to deal with it themselves because they don't know that talking to God about it is an option, because they think they have to be this picture perfect Christian who never yells and never, says choice words and always acts right and does right. But God loves you, not the version of you that you pretend to be, the version of you that you actually are.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you bring that to him and you say, I've had moments where I'll say, God, I'm really mad at you because you didn't come through for me like I thought you would. And I will hash it out with him. I will tell him everything I'm feeling. But when I sit in that conversation long enough for him to answer me, there is always peace or understanding or clarity at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I never leave the conversation feeling worse than what I did when I went in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important for us to know when it comes to how our importance is. A lot of us think we're worthless and God gives us worth, and that's not entirely accurate. We're not worthless to start with. That our value was determined by the person who was willing to put a price for it, right?
Mm.
So this person paid a price that he deemed was what we were worth, and that was his son, which was himself in the flesh. That God is willing to sacrifice himself in order to reconcile us with him so that we would not be held accountable for our limitless sin, and that we would be held redeemed by him. And so if we are the treasure, our value was assigned by the person, determined by what he was willing to pay. And if we think about what God was willing to pay for us, that is a pretty high value.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so you can go ahead and wallow, but remember what your price was. How much did it cost God for you? And then, get out of that pit.
And if he paid that much for you, why are you not willing to invest that much into yourself? And it reminds me of that verse, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And so many of us think we have to clean ourselves up first in order for him to love us, or in order to have value or whatever. But it's really true that, as you are, he's just wanting to walk with you through it.
It reminds me of my favorite analogy to that. I've said it on many different episodes, but it's like we're in this giant room, a big round room with a big pile of garbage in the center of it, which is our sin. And on the other side of that pile of garbage is God. And we think that we have to get to God by going through that garbage and cleaning it up. when in all actuality, all we do is cry out to him, and he'll walk around that pile and stand side by side with his arm around us and say, man, that sure is a lot of garbage. Let's get started.
Mm.
That he will not let us, because we can't. No matter how much work we do on that pile, more garbage gets added to it.
Right.
And so even though he walks to our side and helps us clean this garbage up, more garbage still gets added to it, like the lows. More garbage gets added to it, but more garbage is taken out than is added. And the more we trust him to help us with this, the room gets cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And I don't believe in our lifetime it'll ever get clean. That sanctification will never happen while I still draw breath, because I'm still in this sinful body.
Mm-hmm.
And this sinful body knows that when I die, it's not coming with me. And so it does whatever it can to kick and scream and drag me down.
Mm-hmm.
Once I do finally pass from this mortal coil and I'm in heaven, that room is clean. And I have a new body, a new flesh that has never sinned against God, that has never known sin, that will never war against my spirit. And it'll be a whole lot easier.
Mm. It reminds me of my kids, honestly. My son is a little different because he's always been very neat and he liked to line up his cars, and things like that. He never has to be reminded to clean his room. But my daughter is a tornado. And no matter how much I clean, that child will make another mess. But I don't look at her, are you serious again? Like, I know she's a 4-year-old and she's going to make another mess. That doesn't mean that I regret her. That doesn't mean that I don't love her. Of course I do, because the mess is nothing in comparison to who she is as my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's how God looks at us, is he's like, this mess is minuscule. Like, you think I'm not capable of cleaning it? You really think that me, an all-powerful God who created the heavens and the earth and everything you look at on a daily basis, cannot clean up your sin?
Mm-hmm. I think one doesn't matter to him like the other. Like it's not even comparable. One is not like the other in comparison. I remember when I was carrying my son to bed one night, he was 2-3 years old and he passed. I let him stay up late to watch a movie. And he passed out. I'm carrying him upstairs. And I remember feeling that this is how God feels, that it didn't matter what he did that day. It didn't matter if he was a bad boy, a naughty boy, or a good boy. None of that mattered. None of that even entered my collective thought. But it was my pleasure to carry him and serve him and take him to bed with my loving arms. And that's how God, he doesn't look at the things that we've done. He just looks at the fact that he gets to carry us and hold us and be with us and love us. And that's what he's focusing on. He's not focusing on all the bad. He's not even focusing on all the good. He's just focusing on how much he loves us. And,
right.
And when I got to the top of the stairs, the reverse hit. And I realized through God impressing upon me that that's how God wants us to love him. Not for anything he's done, not for all the prayers he's answered, and not for all the prayers he hasn't answered, but because he is our Father.
That's a word. We are the ones who tend to look at things almost like we're keeping score.
Mm-hmm.
We keep score of ourselves. We keep score of God. We keep score of everyone around us. And if we can learn to look at things from God's lens where he keeps no score, I think it improves our quality of life drastically, because you're set free from that. And you don't realize how draining that is until you're no longer keeping track of the good and the bad.
Mm-hmm. As we're wrapping up, I keep thinking about the listener who's been faithful, but they're just tired. They're still showing up. They're still praying, still trying to trust God, but something just still feels heavy. If that person is listening right now, what would you want them to hear?
I was actually thinking about this today, because I feel like sometimes we feel like we're in these seasons where no matter how much effort we put in, the needle doesn't seem to move. And I think that sometimes God will just put us in these seasons where it's almost like a holding place, where you're not doing anything wrong. You're not making mistakes. You don't have to work harder or do more in order to get to that place. You don't have to push through to get to that place. You just have to wait on him, and you have to let him set the pace, because his yoke is easy and his burden is light. I think sometimes he's doing the majority of the work. He's just saying, hey, sit here until I'm finished. Then we'll move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we try to take that on ourselves. I have to do this. I have to do that. And I would just say that if you are walking in relationship with God, you're doing your part and He will move you forward when it's time.
I couldn't agree more, obviously. And some people, they feel that they need to do something profound. They need to be a pastor. They need to be on mission. And they don't realize that God can use them right where they are, that He can use them home, an encouraging interaction at a gas station on their way home from work, at the grocery store when they grab a can of beans off of the top shelf for a shorter person. Like, you have no idea how God is using you. You just need to be receptive to do whatever it is. That at the end of the day, when we go and be with the Lord and He shows us a list of the things we've done, I promise you will be blown away by all the good things you did that you dismissed. All the people that you helped that you had no idea. All the people who lifted you up in prayer because of what you did for them without a single thought, because you were just obedient to the Holy Spirit within you. We're always focused on the bad, like, oh, He's going to give me everything I said that's wrong. He's going to pick on this. I did this wrong. I did this wrong. We did this wrong. Like reviews. You see bad reviews all the time, hardly any good ones. That's human nature. We like to focus on the negative. But God has a book full of all the positives. And so when we're sitting there like, all right, well, we're going to get, measured out according to what we've done on earth. And we're going to say, oh, I did this wrong. He said, yep. And I did this wrong. He's going to say, yep. And I did this wrong. He said, yep. And then He's going to have this giant book and He's going to open up and say, this is what you did right.
I love that. I agree.
He grunts when he picks it up too, like fake heavy, like puts it on the table. Knowing full well that it's just a show because God wouldn't need to. Blows off. Here we go, buddy. Puts on his readers.
I love that.
Thank you for joining us and reminding us that God meets us where we're at. And while it may not feel like we're being victorious, God carries us through all seasons. And with Him, it's only going to get better and better.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, because I'm glad to have this opportunity to share what I've learned and hopefully encourage someone else along their journey.
Oh, I'm sure you have. I'm sure whoever listens to this is going to hear something they need to hear.
Yeah. We'll make sure to link your book, Leaving Defeat, for anyone who wants to spend more time with this message and learn about more lessons that God revealed to you. And to our listeners, if this conversation helped you put words to something you've been carrying, it would mean so much if you take a moment to rate and follow the podcast. Those small little actions really do help these conversations reach the people who need them most. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, share this episode too, because it might be part of God's goodness for them too. And we love you guys, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Listen, let's stay connected. Come follow us on all the socials at God's Goodness Podcast, where you can find the latest and say hey. It's a really great way to stay in touch. Many of you have asked how you can support the show. You can make donations through any of the links in the About section, or of course by praying for us, as well as sharing and rating and reviewing on Facebook, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Your heartfelt feedback always reminds us why we do this. Until next time, remember, God is always working, miracles are real, and your breakthrough could be just around the corner. Keep believing, keep expecting, and don't forget to share this with someone who needs hope today. We'll talk to you next week.